Hello everybody, welcome to another Stray Basilisk coding stream. This is Jason. Starting a little late today, so let's kind of get into this straight away. So what we're going to be working on today is a Discord bot, and the idea I had for this bot, this is actually something which we've been throwing around behind the scenes as something we wanted to do for our, to actually put into our Discord for Stray Basilisk and our game Steam Hounds, is to have a Discord bot which could kind of gradually reveal to the members of our community bits of lore about the world, and the world building of Steam Hounds. So that's kind of, I figured we're doing these coding streams now and we've never quite got around to making that bot, so maybe that's something I can make a little start on today. Yeah, so hello everyone, how's everyone doing today? The weather's got like windy and cold again, which normally would be a bad thing, but I feel like it's more expected for this kind of time of year here, so part of me is more comfortable with that. It's been too hot, too late, it's kind of disconcerting. Yeah, so what is this bot going to do? So I have done the very basics of getting like the skeleton of this set up already. So if I tab over to Discord, you'll see that this bot does already exist. It has this lovely icon created by the wonderful Fen Evitz, our artist for Steam Hounds, or one of our artists for Steam Hounds. The idea behind this is it's kind of like based on these old crazy absinthe containers that used to exist. So it's a kind of steampunky absinthe dispensing bartender robot. It's kind of the story behind this thing. Yeah. So I've got the very basic kind of skeleton here. So the bot kind of exists and we can talk to it. It can talk to us. It doesn't understand any commands or anything right now, but I knew it might take a bit of time to like set up the bot and generate all of the keys and tokens and stuff you need to make that work, so I went ahead and did that ahead of time. I've also got a skeleton of a project whereby we can actually see this thing in action. So as a bit of a change, instead of using processing in Java or JavaScript, I decided to do this in Go, aka golang, because it's something that I'm actually learning at the moment. So I'm by no means a Go expert. I'm probably only like 80% on the syntax still, so I will screw up and I will do things in a non-proper way, like a non-idiomatic way. But this is something that I'm learning and I'm experimenting with, so I wanted to take this opportunity to kind of play around with it a little more. So if anyone's a Go expert by any chance in the chat, your help and advice would be very much appreciated. So Go is very awesome, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this skeleton, which all it does right now is it kind of connects to the server and just says hello world and then disconnects after like 30 seconds or something. I'm just going to go through and kind of comment this and explain what's happening. I normally don't like to like pre-write any code, but this took me half an hour of fiddling around with reading the documentation and finding the right library which could connect to Discord and stuff, so I figured I'd do this in advance and then just sort of walk through it. So in Go, everything goes in a package, and like in many languages, if you create a function called main, then that's kind of the entry point of the program. The basic logic here is in order to connect a Discord bot, there's like a token, which is essentially like the secret key which that bot uses to connect and sort of authenticate with Discord. That is sitting in a text file, which I'm not going to show you because, well, for hopefully obvious reasons. So all we're doing here is loading this token from a text file. So I've defined a little function to do that. Wow, my code navigation is going super slow. It's down here. All that does is basically open the file. So if you're not used to Go, you'll notice all over the place we have this if error is not nil, then return something or like throw something. Go has a very opinionated design, and one thing is that all errors have to be handled like very super explicitly, which can seem like super verbose and long, but it's actually, I think it's a good practice. So the code can look kind of verbose, but it ends up being like pretty rock solid. So Go was made by some folks at Google about 10 years ago to kind of deal with the engineering problems they had, like creating all of their crazy big distributed backend infrastructure. So it's a very like pragmatic engineer's language. So rather than doing stuff in a super pretty succinct way, it's just very straightforward and very direct. You know, we try and open a file, gives us back the file, and then it gives us back maybe an error, and we just have to check. We just have to check that error. In fact, Go's so strict that if I don't do anything with that error, it will probably tell me that I've like not even used a variable. So that's how strict it is. You can't even declare a variable and not use it, which is actually kind of nice. So we open that file. This is another really neat thing about Go is you've opened this file, like at some point we need to close it, right? Even if there's an error processing the file, we're going to need to make sure we close it. So we can use this defer statement, and this basically means it's kind of like a try catch finally thing. If you're used to that from other languages, it will just make sure that this happens kind of at the end of the function regardless of what happens. Then we create a scanner thing which will just read through this file line by line. And then basically what this does is it will check for we'll go through each line of the file, we'll put that into S, and then it will trim out any white space, and if it finds a line which isn't just white space, then it will return that string, and it will return a nil error. Like this is a common pattern as well. You'll return the actual result, and you'll then return an error which may be nil. Like that's what's happening here inside this as well. Sort of everything does things that way in Go. Why am I looking for a non-empty line instead of just grabbing like the whole content of the file? It's because I thought I might accidentally open this in the text editor. So what I've done is I've like put the token like after a load of blank lines. So even if I accidentally open this, you cannot see it. So that's why I'm going to this effort here. Yeah, if we fail to scan for some reason, we need to like push the error back up. And if we get up to the end without finding something, then it means the file didn't have any non-blank lines, so there was no token in there. So we load that up. We kind of then construct a new Discord client. And then what we do here is we register stuff which will kind of respond to events which happen in Discord. So all we're registering right now is something that happens on the like ready event. So this basically happens when the connection succeeds. And then here we actually connect. And then what I've done temporarily to stop this thing from the program from immediately ending is it just kind of sleeps for 30 seconds. Like that's not actually what we want this to do ultimately, but we kind of want it to hang around connected forever. Yeah, but that's what we're doing there, just so the program doesn't immediately die. We'll replace that almost immediately, I think, with something which like waits for like a quick command or something. So the real meaty stuff is going to be in these handlers, which will respond to like people posting messages into the Discord, or the bot getting DMs, or the bot seeing new people arrive in the server and stuff like that. So I've really just got a basic skeleton here whereby this, by the way, is the ID of this particular kind of Discord channel in this particular server, so it knows like where it's speaking to. And what this will do is when it's connected, this will kind of get called. It will set its little status, which is, you know, this thing here. So we can control what that says. And then it will just send a message into the channel. So we can run this now. We'll see the bot just said hello world. We can see it's online. Its status is playing okay, which is kind of weird. And then if we wait around 30 seconds, it will disconnect eventually. I'd like to be able to change the status. You know, some people have a status like follower here, it just has follower rather than like playing something. I'll maybe look into the API. Okay, it's gone. I'll maybe look into the API to see how that's done, because that's a nicer thing. I feel like we want to kind of encourage people to talk to this bot, so I'll just put like, please at me or something. I don't know. Yeah, So then after 30 seconds it disconnects. Let's change that so that it will just hang around and wait for a cancel. I happen to have the example code for this up. So this is the library which does that Discord connection, and this is like the basic sort of hello world example. And this is what they do. This is kind of probably overcomplicated, but I can just copy and paste this code, which just waits for like a termination signal. And this actually gets into some funky stuff you can do with Go. The other thing with Go is it's kind of geared towards concurrency and running stuff in parallel. And it's got some cool features like these channel things in here to support that, which you normally don't see in other languages, but what this basically does, yeah, I'm sure there's a way simpler way to do this. It kind of makes a channel waiting for an operating system signal. It kind of says which signals it wants to know about, and then this syntax, which is kind of funky, is so we kind of create this channel where these operating system signals like please close or like hey the system's going to restart or whatever can come through, and then you can kind of load the contents of that into a variable. You do it like this. So it's like take this channel and like wait for a message on this channel and store it in this variable. But we're kind of just waiting for the signal. We don't actually need to do something with it. So we can kind of have a simpler syntax there. How much do you have to think about concurrency in Go, and how much does it manage away for you? So I would say, so it has these primitives built into the language, right? Like these channels. It basically very strongly encourages you to not go around like doing locking and explicit synchronization, but instead having these well-defined channels which you like pass messages through. So you can do stuff like you can call any function in parallel just by saying go, token some file, and then it will just go off and run that in parallel. And a common pattern is like I'm gonna like make a result channel. So this thing's going to give us the token back as a string, right? So we want a channel for a string, and then we can like pass in the channel here, and then we can do like wait for what's the syntax for declaring and reading from a channel? Will this work? Okay. See, when I say I'm only 80% on the syntax, I'm not totally sure. Okay. So a very common pattern is you'll create like a channel through which to receive the result. You'll like just tell Go to go off and run this function like on some other thread, and you'll give it the channel, and then you'll sort of wait for the result like that. And you can do like explicit locking and stuff, but it handles concurrency by like encouraging you to do it in this way, which kind of sidesteps a load of the normal issues you'd have around race conditions and data and stuff like that. By encouraging you to like not there's like a mantra or something. It's something like don't share data but pass messages. There's something to that effect. Like it kind of it strongly encourages this approach where there is no data which is like specifically shared. Like it's all like done through like message passing. So you just naturally end up architecting stuff in this way, and so it ends up like being kind of clean. And there are fancier things it kind of does for you as well. Like you can like wait on several of these channels at once, and then whatever one you get a message through first, like that bit of code then runs. So you can say, hey, if I get, which we'll probably do actually for the internal workings of our bot, it could be like, oh, if we see somebody new join the server, then run this bit of code, and we'll be waiting on a certain channel for that message. Or if we see a message come in that's like atting the bot, we'll run this bit of code. Or if we see like a quick command come in, then we'll like end the whole little, they call it a go routine, which is like a kind of very lightweight thread, which you can kind of run like this. So it's got built-in things which kind of allow you to do that in a very kind of nice way, and like the more raw, unsafe ways of doing it with like mutexes and stuff are buried away in like packages which you can use, but you're kind of encouraged not to. Yeah. In terms of like doing this super idiomatically, I'm not quite 100% on how to do that yet. Let's see if our change here works. So air horn is like the hello world example. So I could probably simplify this, right, by just saying I want a channel which we're going to get something on. Say a channel we get a string, and then just waiting on it, and just know that we'll never get something. Yeah, that's probably a way simpler way to do it. We just kill the program like that. Yeah, Go has a really, really good tutorial called the tour, which is like an interactive thing with like an editor built in, and it shows you all of the stuff you can do with like concurrency. Yeah, so I encourage like taking a look into it. It's basically, it imposes like pretty much the one true way of doing stuff. So one of the good benefits is that pretty much all Go code looks the same, because there's really only one way of doing things without, if you're trying to handle this error, like you just do this. This is the way you do it. So it's kind of easy to read other people's code because it's all kind of standard and in a way boring, which in a practical sense is pretty good. Okay, so anyway, what should this bot actually do for us? The way I'm kind of envisioning this working is that, and I don't know how I'm going to draw this in a diagram, my kind of thought is that the bot will know certain things about the world, right? It will know about certain like people, let's say, and like places, and maybe like factions, and like current events, and maybe every time you like talk to the bot, it's then gonna like look for something to reply with. So it'll have like some canned preset like responses that you can give. So basically, if you at the bot, it's gonna say something. That's kind of boring, right? Like, this could be kind of interesting. We could add more stuff into this pool of stuff which it says on the back end, and in that sense, like, kind of create like this narrative of new information that is revealed. But what I'd really like is to make this a bit more of a game where, kind of like an investigation kind of game, whereby there'll be this big pool of stuff which it knows and stuff which it can say, like these little breadcrumbs of information, and initially it'll only be saying like a very limited set of them, but you should then be able to like unlock new stuff, right? So maybe it says, oh, have you heard about this faction called the Industrialists? And or it will say something about them, oh, by the way, this faction exists. And then if you ask them and mention that faction, it will then kind of unlock the next level of information about them, if that makes sense. So it might like name drop a certain person or place or faction or event, and if you then ask about it, it will then unlock new breadcrumbs of information which kind of relate to that term, if that makes sense. So you can kind of discover everything it knows incrementally by asking it about stuff which it's previously mentioned, and thereby like unveiling this like fog of war of everything it knows. is kind of the way I can picture this working. And maybe there need to be some limits, right? Like maybe any given person can only ask it so many things every hour or something before it will just get bored and not respond to you. So people can't just ask it about everything it's ever said and immediately uncover the whole set of knowledge. Or maybe it will only drop certain breadcrumbs in, like when a new person joins the server or when a new person first talks to it. So there'd be a kind of way of like rate limiting that. But that's kind of what I want to do, right? So have, let's call it a breadcrumb, like some bit of information. And each breadcrumb will have like the actual text of it. It will have maybe some like prerequisites, right? Like stuff you already need to have uncovered in order for this breadcrumb to come up. Like if you don't know about faction X, then breadcrumbs about faction X won't appear. So kind of like an array of those maybe. And then maybe like a list of things which it reveals. I don't have a good name for these. Let's just call it reveals. So it might work like this, right? So initially, there's this pool of stuff which you've already revealed. So it's going to go through all the breadcrumbs. When it wants to say something, it will go through all the breadcrumbs and say, hey, what stuff can I say? What am I allowed to talk about? And initially, that will pretty much be only the stuff with like no prerequisites, right? Like really basic information. So then it might say, oh, there's this faction X which exists. And then it will say, faction X will then be in the like the pool of revealed stuff. So then when it comes to say something new, it can now start saying stuff which have the prerequisite of faction X. So that's one way to do this, right? But if we do that, there's really no interaction, right? You just ask it to say stuff and eventually it reveals more and more things. I would prefer it if maybe the way you actually get something into this pool of like known stuff which it's allowed to talk about is to actually ask it specifically about it, right? So maybe it says something like, you know, faction X exists. You know, the bot will say that. And then if a user says, tell me about faction X, or hey, what do you know about faction X? That's when that gets put into the pool. So not only does the bot have to like name drop something, a user also then has to like mention them, and now the bot will like start more freely talking about that. So it's a bit more user directed in terms of its revealing of information, if that makes sense. So how the heck do we make that happen? I think I'm going to make another package in here. Let's call it the bot brain. This is probably not idiomatic package structure, but what are you going to do? Brain. Let's say that the bot should have like a knowledge base, right? Like stuff that it knows. So okay, let's start like doing some modeling of the data we need for this. So we have these breadcrumbs. We need like some structure or class or something to store those. Go doesn't really have classes; it has structs. I believe that's the syntax just from memory. Go has a really interesting feature as well of the way you make stuff like public or private is if it's capitalized, then it's available to like outside code. If it's lowercase, then it's like a private thing, which to me is kind of cool. This will probably be private actually. So it has the text. It has probably an array of prerequisites. Let's for now give it a I forget where you need commas and okay, there we go. Oh, it's also super strict about formatting, so it will just format stuff for you. And if you prefer tabs, if you prefer spaces instead of tabs, then tough luck. It's just gonna change it to tabs for you. The good thing is though, normally that would really annoy me that it like has a strictly enforced like syntax here. Like for example, you can just do something like that, right? If I save, it's gonna just standardize it. It's kind of weird. And if you just had to write it in its preferred way all the time, that'd be annoying. But the fact that it just auto formats it every time you save kind of makes it okay, and I actually don't mind that at all. Okay. Let's just say if we have a set of breadcrumbs. In fact, I can kind of declare this kind of inline like this. So let's just create a couple of these for kind of an example. By the way, I'm super open to suggestions about what this actual law should be and what things should exist. And I did in fact create like a public like mind map thing. So I think for this stream specifically, we're not necessarily going to get deep into Steamhound's law, but I thought it would be cool if people watching could even start just creating their own little sets of law. So I'm just going to dump this link in here. If anyone feels so inclined to like start editing and adding stuff that I can eventually program into this bot, then that would be cool. So what do we want? So the text is going to be the text. So we probably want a convention for like how these things are named. So I'm going to say faction.x, something like that. I hope I've got my syntax correct. Cool. Let's just give it some meaningless thing which doesn't tell us anything. And let's give us something a bit more, some deep lore on Faction X. Faction X are meanies. That doesn't reveal anything in particular. So hopefully you can see what I'm doing here is I'm creating like a kind of hierarchy thing where, you know, these two things have no prerequisites, so it can say them whenever it wants. But as soon as it said the Faction X exists, this now becomes like knowledge, and now this one is like eligible to kind of come up. So let's create its like initial knowledge, right? And I'm going to have an empty kind of array. It's actually not technically not an array, it's a slice, which is kind of like a list. I'm not going to get into that whole deal. It's like a dynamically sized array. Kind of effectively in practice you can use it like that. I'm just kind of making this stuff all global as well, which is not ideal, but for now it should be okay. So let's just say let's just give it a save function, right? Just going to return a string. So how is this going to work? We kind of need to, okay, I'll just kind of write some pseudocoding comments here. So it's like figure out stuff right? That's kind of what we need to do. So what's eligible to be said? It's any breadcrumb for which the prerequisites are met. So I'm going to kind of create a variable. So this is how we make one of these string slices, kind of like a list of strings. Now I'm just going to iterate through all of the stuff in our set of breadcrumbs and see, do this kind of check about the prerequisites and whether all the stuff, all the prerequisites are in this list kind of thing. So Go is interesting in that it only has one kind of loop, which is a for loop. But it does everything. Like you can use this for syntax for like infinite loops. If I just do for like that, that's an infinite loop. I can say I want to go through, I want the index and the breadcrumb in all of the breadcrumbs. That's like for each loop essentially. Oh yeah, if something has a capital letter, which means it's like publicly available, then it really wants you to put a comment on it. So you're kind of forced to include some basic documentation along with the code. Again, you'll see how this is like super pragmatic and opinionated, but it ends up being pretty nice. Okay. What we're doing wrong here. Okay, so I need a length. I can just give it that length to begin with. So okay, so now I kind of expecting an error. So I don't care about this index. So one cool thing in Go is because it's very strict and it will complain if you yeah, so it's complaining now that I've declared stuff and not used it. The same with this index, the same with this BC thing. If I don't care about the index, like in this loop, I can assign it to this underscore, which is kind of like throwing it away into the void. It's called the blank. I don't know, I can't remember what it's called, but that's how you say, yeah, I genuinely don't care about this like return value. And then some other stuff I've declared but not used, so I'm just gonna make sure I use them now. So so I have to go over the prerequisites for this particular breadcrumb. And then I want to check if the known stuff kind of contains that. I'm trying to remember if Go even has contains. Yeah. Again, another example of how Go does not have like, does this array contain something? How do you check if it contains something? You do a for loop over it, right? It makes you like super verbose, but that's the way it's done. Like that's what's actually happening. So you just write that and you live with it. So let's say unmatched. I'm going to check if there are any unmatched prerequisites. I might factor some of this out, so okay, so we're going through all of the prerequisites for this little breadcrumb of knowledge, and then we're checking all the stuff we know. Yeah, if it's in that list, then we've matched it, we've found it. If we end up not matching something, it's not in our like knowledge pool yet, then prerequisites aren't met for that breadcrumb. So we want to, in this case, if the prerequisites are met, we want to add it to this list of like eligible stuff to say. And the way we do that is an append function here. Should be a list of breadcrumbs, in fact. Okay, so now we've got this list of eligible stuff. We should pick one at random. Well, actually, like, what if there's nothing eligible, right? So if there's nothing we can say, then a bit of attitude there. Okay, so let's pick one at random. What we need to do is say, probably need to import a random package here. Is it called random? I'm not sure. Okay, so we can get a random integer. Oh, it just gives us any. So, okay. Something like this to make sure it's within that range. Okay, I think we can factor some of this out as well to like something which will pick something that we're eligible to say. Then we can just return that. You know what, in this case, maybe we can say this actually should not happen. So we can just bail out. I mean, something's horribly misconfigured. So we pick a breadcrumb. Then what do we need to do? So we need to add all of its stuff. package called random, or was the package called rand? Okay. Oh, okay, it's math/rand. Which means this should be like that. This returns a breadcrumb. So yeah, so we kind of need a this kind of should be a set, right? Like rather than just a list of stuff. So we could use like a map for that. So go nope. Let's make it a map from strings to bool. That's the way that looks. Actually need to construct this here rather than just specify the type. So how do we do here? We no longer need to iterate over this, right? We can just say okay, that kind of simplifies that a bit. And now I'm going to go through and make sure that not the prerequisites, but the reveals are now sort of added to our knowledge rank, if you like. Okay. Okay, I think that's all good. So what's the logic here? When we ask the bot to say something, it's going to pick something that it's like eligible to say. How does it pick something that's eligible to say? It goes through all of the things in its library of stuff. And then if one has all of its prerequisites met, then it's going to add it to the list of stuff it might say right now. How does it know the prerequisites are met? It just loops through them all and checks that if they're like in the knowledge base. And it just randomly picks one of the eligible ones that bubbles back up here. We want to make sure that we ferret away all the stuff that we've now learned. So if this one gets picked, then this should now be added to our kind of knowledge base, which will then mean that this thing is now like something it might say in the future, right? So yeah, and then it just returns the actual text that it's going to say. So what we could do is add another handler here where it's going to somehow respond to a message coming in, or a command, or the way I kind of want it to work actually is if it gets added. And I think there's some example code here which we can use from this example. So this is what the handler looks like. So this gets called when a message comes in, and then we can do stuff like checking if I'm added and stuff like that. What's it called? On message create. What are we going to do? So Let's do something real basic for now. Just have it respond to this specific thing. And what I was about to do is nest the logic in here, but the idiomatic go thing is to say, if it's not true, then like we bail out. The reason being that there are so many of these checks that if you start doing, if error is nil, then do this and start nesting these, it gets like super deep. So you're very much encouraged to like just return early if you hit any kind of error condition. Which makes sense. It keeps the code like more in a straight line kind of down the left hand side. It's more readable and stuff like that. Yeah. Old when body well, we should probably also check, so if, I think this was an example which we can copy and paste from. Yeah, right, like you don't want it to respond to messages from itself, or it could get in some horrific infinite spam loop. So that makes sense there. It's not. So then what we want to do is we kind of need access to our brain code, which is in a separate package here. Another interesting thing about Go is that when you import something that's not part of the standard library, you literally just, for the most part, you put like a GitHub URL, and it can go out and download the source code for those, which is kind of neat. It's kind of funky, but it actually, for the most part, works pretty well. So what we're going to do is we're going to say brain, say something, right, and then we're just going to send a message. Okay, this should oh, so I'm reusing this, I shouldn't call this S. Okay, so right now this is not thread safe, I don't believe, so that's something we can fix shortly after, and then we'll get into some of the concurrency stuff as we fix that, I think. But I believe we can now start the bot. I was going to say we should run this in debug mode, but let's be daring and just run the thing. Okay, it said hello. If we just say a random thing, nothing's going to happen. Okay. Let me run this in debug mode just so we can... Oh, I never registered the handler, did I? Another thing in Go is you notice this is a function, so there's a lot of like passing functions around, and you can have anonymous functions and stuff like that, which is very super common. Yeah, let's debug this anyway. This running? Okay, there we go. Oh, I found a message. That's interesting. Let's have a look inside the message. Oh, so I guess Discord API probably plays back stuff that it's previously seen, like historical. stuff. Is that what's happening here? In any case, we don't care about that. Oh no, it's its own welcome message it just responded to. Okay. So now if I just say hey, then switch to the wrong screen for some reason, that's odd. So we can look inside the message. The content is hey. The author is probably me. Yep, that makes sense. So it's probably not going to be, it's going to get bailed out at this point. Yep, so that's kind of what we want. Let's say the magic words. Now, hopefully this time, it's actually going to try and say something. Let's jump into this code. So, it needs to pick something to say. So, it will go through all of its things. Look at the first breadcrumb, which it should be able to say, right? The prerequisite should be met. Seems to be true. Added it to the list of eligible stuff. Okay, I think I know what I've done wrong here. So I've made an array which already has so I'm seeing like a 4-element array here when I only expected it to be, I expected it to have like capacity 4, but only like nothing in it yet. So I think I actually need to do things like that. So I'm gonna stop this because we're gonna get some weird results. Okay. Just add the breakpoint here this time. Oh, I need to be in this main file. Okay, the bot is running. Let's say hey, bot. Okay, this is what we want. It has a length of 0 and capacity of 3 there. So it's going to go through each breadcrumb. Prerequisite should be met for the first one. So that goes to the list of eligible. Prerequisite should not be met for the second one. But they were, which means we probably did something weirdly wrong. Let's try and catch that on the... Oh no, it had no prerequisites. It's the third one, which it should not be able to say just yet. Okay. So now we have our list of eligible things. It could say hello world. It could say faction X exists. It should now pick one of those at random for us. And it in fact did do that. It picked this breadcrumb. Oh, okay, it picked something which would reveal a bit of information to us. So now it should go through and update our little knowledge bank here. Okay, so now we know about faction X. It's going to return the text, and then it's going to say it in Discord. Faction X exists. Nice. So now if we do this again, it's going to pick the eligible stuff, and they should all now be eligible to say, since it's now spilled the beans about the existence of faction X. So now I can pick any of those. I happen to pick Hello World, so we can just press play here. I'm going to remove this breakpoint so we can just talk to the bot for a bit. Hey bot. Nice. So let's just run this again. So right now, every time we run it, its whole knowledge base is like wiped out, which is something ultimately we need to fix. Awesome. Okay. So there are a few ways we could consider golang. Should be golang. Okay. There are a few ways we consider enhancing this now. So there are a couple of things which are more or less bugs. Namely that if we have multiple calls to this, then we start messing around in the bot's brain and iterating over these things and adding stuff to this, potentially, and having race conditions there. So we probably want to use either locking or some kind of like channel mechanism to like serialize this, right? So make sure that we don't have two things going at once and people take turns in terms of accessing and updating this little knowledge base dealy. So I think the way to do that probably is to use some channels. So we probably only need one, right? Like this message channel. So I think what I'm going to do is say message pump, which expects a channel of these dealies. A channel of pointers to message objects, if you like. Or in fact, it probably should return. No, okay, we want. Okay, that makes sense to me. And then all we're going to do here is say we're just going to do an infinite loop, and then there is some cool syntax where we can listen for. Oh, you know what? All we need to do is say wait for stuff into this channel, and there's in fact a simpler way to do that. Think like this, is that right? Yes. Or no. Let me remind myself of the channel syntax. Just like that. Okay. Okay, so this is the syntax for like listening for stuff in this channel, and this will kind of block until something comes through. And then we can put the actual kind of information here. Okay, so we need this session object also, so we probably want a little structure to like bundle those up. Which has both of these things here. think what I'm going to do now. Okay. Okay, so now we kind of bundled up the information this needs to do its work into this little structure, so we can now pump stuff into this through this channel, and it will kind of go through those kind of one by one. So how do we actually want to send stuff to this? Now it kind of makes more sense that you can use like a little anonymous function here. So what we're going to need to do, we're going to need to first create this channel here. So now we can actually start this thing. Okay, so what are we doing here? So we're creating a channel which accepts data through it of this particular type, and that type contains like a Discord session and an actual message which has come through. And now we're using this Go syntax to fire off a separate thread, basically, or a Go routine, as it's called, which can handle these. And we're telling that Go routine, hey, this is the channel through which you should be kind of listening for messages. And then here's the implementation of that, and we just kind of like loop over this as if it was just like an array or something, and this will kind of block and then wait for stuff to come through, and then this effectively causes messages to be processed one by one, even if the Discord library we're using might like respond to several messages at the same time. In order to connect the dots finally here, we kind of need to write a little anonymous function here, which will take stuff coming through from the Discord API and what does it need to do? It just needs to send it into the message channel, and it's going to like package this up as a thing, so we can just create a new thing of this struct just like this. So SM okay, so it's complaining here implicit assignment of unexported field. That's because this thing is in another package, and I use lowercase s and m, which means they're like private members of this struct, if you like. So I should actually like capitalize those. By the way, I'm sure this whole approach is like that I'm missing something, and there's a slightly like simpler way or more idiomatic way to do this, but these are kind of, this is at least basically using the concurrency primitives which Go gives you. Okay, so what are we doing? We're creating this channel and starting this thing already, which will be like listening for incoming messages coming through that channel, and then when the Discord client tells us that a message is coming, we just pump it into that channel. So the functionality here should be exactly the same, except ideally it will, doesn't like that. Okay, it probably wants me to use these in like a named way. Restart that. In fact, let's use the debugger so we can check this is really working. So we'll add a breakpoint here. We'll add one in here as well, and we can kind of see a bit more clearly how this all connects together. If there are any questions, by the way, or like comments about how I should be doing this better, please do let me know. Okay, so it's probably just received its own welcome message, right? We can see that it said hello world when I started it. It's probably got this message which says hello world. Yep, it's going to pump it into that channel, and then we should see that get picked up in this bit of code here, right? So this is just waiting around for a message to come through. Then it's going to do the exact same stuff we did before, and it's going to not respond to it because it's from itself, but you know. Okay. Received something. And something went wrong there. Okay, that's what's happened here. Oh, okay, it returned. It should not bail out of this entirely. It should continue and like wait for another message to come. Okay, kind of a silly error there. Since we know this like pipe line kind of works, I'm going to get rid of the comment, get rid of the breakpoint there. Okay, it's seeing its own hello world message. Should ignore that. We say hey bot, it should now respond to this. Cool. It's then probably seeing its own response, and now it's going to ignore that one. Okay. Yes, okay, there we go. So I think this kind of does, you know, in a way, like you could add a load of content to this and we'd kind of have this working. There are a couple of things I want to add though. I'd like to not respond to the words hey bot, but respond to people atting it. I feel that's kind of simpler. So I want to be able to check. I want to be able to check if I'm being atted. So I'm not sure exactly internally what the content of a message will look like if I'm atting something or someone. Or some bot, so I'm gonna say hello to it and then see what the content of the message is, because I want to be able to dynamically identify messages which are like atting the bot. Aha. So what I'm seeing here, I believe, is the bot's user ID. I can probably even find that here. State. User ID. State. Oh. Anyway, I know my own IDs here, right? So I kind of want to be able to check if I'm being atted. Yeah, like maybe there's something which can say give me all the ats in this, but what I'm thinking is I can just check if I can just check if the content of the thing, I know what my ID is because it's like here in my session, so I can just check if the content of the message includes like this like magic string, and then that probably is enough to determine if I've been atted or not. So probably something like. So another thing in Go is you don't get a lot of like calling methods on a string like that. It's all like in some other package. The other weird thing is if I put an include in and then just okay, let's see what happens if I manually say something like that. Okay, it's like if you put it into the client, it becomes a real @ for like a non-existent thing, I guess. So can I copy the ID? Yeah, there's no need to escape it, I guess, because it's you can't put that literal text without actually @ing the bot. So if the message body contains that, then I think we're all good. So I can probably say, yeah, contains. So we want @ plus. Let's pre-calculate this. No, let's not, because the session may be different. Okay, so it is. So it's @ and then the number. This is like old school, like C style string formatting functions. That's kind of how it works. The only nice thing in Go is rather than having to say like %i or %string, I can just do %v, which is like whatever the natural representation of something is. And then my ID is here. Okay, I believe that's going to be correct. Let's, yeah, leave the breakpoint in there and we will check this out. Hello world. I can say hey. @me seems good. Yep, we're going to bail out because that was not @ the bot. But if I say nice. So we now have the bot responding when you @ it, which is kind of nice. What happens if you edit a message? Nothing. Okay. Awesome. This is pretty cool. Like, I'd really love some advice or input now on like what kind of lore we want to have this thing include. If anyone has ideas or wants to do the little creative writing exercise of coming up with stuff, then I would very much appreciate that if you just throw some stuff in chat. Otherwise, there are 1 or 2 small other things I'd like to do. Okay, so what would I like to do? Probably we should like save this knowledge base out to disk and reload it so that we don't lose everything when we restart. Probably we should read this from disk as well. Oh, also I want to make it so that it's not sufficient to... Okay, or maybe the bot doesn't necessarily reveal stuff to you, but you should be able to add stuff to its knowledge base just by saying like certain keywords, right? So let's do something like this. Where we can say, so there are certain sets of triggers which will reveal something. That makes sense. So now if the if you say like faction X yourself, then maybe it will like then add that into the thing. So we could potentially remove this here, right? So you'd have to notice it mentioned faction X and then ask it about it, and then you get something relating to it back. Hopefully that makes sense. So let's say think about how people might like refer to this. So if they say any of those things, then they get this bit of knowledge revealed. That makes sense? So now temporarily I want to kind of remove it from here. Also a kind of funny thing in Go is when you have like list of things, you know how in JavaScript, so in some languages, it will allow you to have like this extra comma on the end, which is nice because it's easy when you're like copy and pasting stuff to not, you know, if it's like this, then you end up copy and pasting it and then missing the comma out. So things like JavaScript will allow you to have that trailing comma. Go requires you to have the trailing comma because again, there's only one way to do things and it's pragmatic, and yeah, it's kind of interesting. So it's complaining here because I do not have a comma at the end of my thing. Also, I'm not specifying that. Yeah. Expecting comma. It's kind of fun. Okay, so now we kind of also want to look for keywords, right? So and what should happen here? So we should check if any keywords contained in the message, and then add corresponding to our kind of knowledge base. Where's that? Oh, here? Yeah, oh, okay, so if it's a multi-line thing, you can have a single line thing like that, and it's okay. Yeah, so there isn't one in here, but if I like made this like multi-line, then it would then be required, kind of thing. It'll probably format that in a certain kind of way. Yeah. So I think it might be useful as well if this thing, well, I'm actually going to use this same comment here. I'm thinking it should make sense to return a list of the new things it's revealed to us. Yeah, that's right. So I think the actual error is probably, yeah. I'm sure I've seen a specific error about missing colon in a multi-line, missing comma in a multi-line statement or something like that. And it's because, you know, you're going to be copy and pasting lines, and like you can mess up the commas. Okay. Yeah, so I'm thinking this should return some strings, because if a message has caused us to learn new stuff, then probably we then want the bot to respond not just with anything it's eligible to say, but we kind of want to then like maybe bias this to be based on yeah, it's kind of weird, but there is like a logic to it, I suppose. Yeah, so I'm thinking that if we've used a keyword which has caused something new to be like learned, then it should probably respond in kind with something that relates to that keyword where possible. So that's kind of an enhancement we can make later on. So let's say, oh no. So let's make a slice of strings there, and then I'm just going to say for you can see me like instinctively putting like syntax from other languages in here, but you know, brackets in here it shouldn't be. Definitely still getting used to it. I think what I want to do, I probably want to like lowercase. That so we can compare stuff a bit more nicely. To lower. Okay. Arbitrarily pre-allocating a bit there. So go through the keywords, and I'm going to say if. Oh, each keyword has multiple triggers as well. So for and then if the lowercase message oh, this contains any. That's nice. How does that work? Oh, okay, it's characters. We don't care about that. It's contained, then it shouldn't be an array, it should probably be a map. Oh, we're kind of using it like a set. Because we may match multiple of these triggers, so keyword dot. Okay. Okay. We probably want to break out at that point. Okay, I'm going to say for key value, I only care about the keys. So I'm throw away values in the match knowledge. I'm going to say our knowledge. True. Okay, that's interesting. Didn't know you could do that. I was just hovering there to check that I'm getting the key and not the value. It seems to be because the type is string. Okay. So let's just return this thing. Don't necessarily need to do anything with it for now. But inside our message pump we can say so before we reply, we're going to check the message for keywords. It's going to complain because I've created this variable for keywords in the content. Is that correct? Okay. Nope. C. Okay, so now it's complaining I've declared this but not used it, so I can either throw it away like that, or I can just call something with no kind of assignments. By the way, this sting is like a declaration and assignment together, like an auto declaration assignment thing. If you can declare something first and then just use like equals like that. I'm going to keep this to remind me because I kind of want to use this later. Okay, doesn't like that. You know what, I'm just going to print that out actually. And I'm going to say if or, okay, no. There we go. Do something with that variable now. Okay, so I believe now if we run this, hopefully nothing goes terribly wrong. Logbot is running. So I can at him. Oh. Okay, I think that got... Why is he saying hello world? That's weird. Why is he saying two things? Let us check what's going on here. Debug. Okay. Okay, so we're saying faction X exists. Oh, I think I probably had two versions running. Okay, that's why. So, yeah, I had debug running and like normal mode running. Okay, so it's telling us faction X exists, which is fine. But even though he's revealed that faction X exists, he's not going to talk about faction X in detail until we kind of prompt them. So let's say, actually let's definitely put a breakpoint here so we can check that this all works. Say so now we're going to lowercase the input message, just to standardize it so it's easier to check. And then go go through all of the keywords, then they go through each trigger. So the trigger is faction X, which I did in fact say. Will it contain that? Yes, it will. So now our match knowledge now contains faction X. We're going to break out. I believe there's no more keywords. It's going to update our knowledge base. It's going to return that back up. And now if I just press play, we should see some stuff printed. Learn about faction X. They still just said hello world, which is not ideal. But if I keep going, technically this isn't new knowledge either, right? It's just keywords. Like if it's gonna still say we learned about faction X. Okay, no it won't. Okay. Okay, now it can actually talk about faction X more freely. Which is kind of cool. So I'd like to go one step further and have it yeah, it's not really new knowledge, right? It's just keywords or concepts matched. So okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass in here a map of string reference knowledge, right? And then I think what I will do is pass that through here so that this can kind of bias, right? So what I'm going to do is say if that isn't empty, like if some specific knowledge has been referred to, let me chain this up as well. Not new knowledge, but like reference knowledge. Then I can kind of bias this or like only say stuff that relates to stuff which the user has said, for example. So we pass that through here, and then I kind of want to say if reference knowledge is greater than 0, so if there's some specific context to this message based on keywords, then I want to be able to like reject this thing if it doesn't refer to at least one of them. Like maybe there should even be like some scoring and weighting, but can make it more simple for now. So how do we do this? So I'm going to go over the prerequisites, I think. So go over the prerequisites for this breadcrumb. If right, so if the reference knowledge for the user's message contains one of these prerequisites, then we've got a match, right? So if it's contained there, then we've got a match. We can stop checking. We should probably actually score these, but you know. Oh, you know what? There's actually a hacky way to do this. Okay, I'm going to do it. So what I'm thinking here is I wanted to like weight this. I could kind of just add things to this list multiple times based on how many keywords they match, right? So just going to refactor this slightly. So if no prereqs are met, then I'm just going to continue. Otherwise, if the length is 0, then I'm just going to add it in like this. Otherwise, meaning if there is some reference knowledge, then I'm going to add it to the list once for every bit of reference knowledge that is matched, if that makes sense. So it will be biased or weighted accordingly to how many of these tags it matches. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. So if we go through an example, like let's say let's add something else here, in fact. Yeah, I'm sure there's a nicer way we could do this. Okay, so now we have a longer kind of chain here, right? So they'll mention faction X, and then we ask more about faction X, and then they'll tell us that they're mean. We mention, we might say, why are faction X mean? Yeah, it's probably a more robust way to like specify these matches, like with the ordering of these being different. Like if they use the word faction X and mean in any combination in the message, maybe it should match, but this is probably okay. Then we've got this new bit of information, which can cause this to appear. So what we can now do is if we use something which matches both of these, then we can like weight this message, which is a more specific response, to be higher, right? So we kind of go through here. We ignore anything which we don't have the prerequisites for, that's fine. And then if there's no reference knowledge, if it's just a random message, then we're going to pick anything like equally that we're eligible to say, just like this. Otherwise, we're going to go through all of the prerequisites. So let's consider, just going to copy and paste these so we can refer to them. Right, so let's say the user's message included like match the tags for both of these things. Then we'd go through this one, we'd loop through all of the prerequisites, we'd say, does the reference knowledge include faction X? Yes, it does, so we're going to add it to the list of eligible things. Whereas for this one, we'd loop through faction X, we'd add it to the list because that matches, and then we'd check this one, and then we'd add it to the list again because it matches this also, which means it's now in this list twice, which means it's twice as likely to get picked, which means it's kind of, we've got like a hacky weighting system going on there. Let me know if that's gibberish, but I think this will do something for us. So Okay, that's kind of what we're doing here. Ultimately, this won't scale because if there are 1,000 things it can say, the fact that something's been put in there twice, not going to do too much. But with a small like set of things like this, it will kind of have the desired effect, I think. Oh, I'm getting another thing golang does is you have the variable name before the type, and obviously out of instinct I've been doing this incorrectly here, which I did not like. Okay. So I believe that this now should be all connected up. And if we debug this again, we can kind of check that this is working. Say hi to the bot. It's going to look for keywords in that. Unsurprisingly, there was nothing special there. So it's going to look for a response. It's going to look for what it's eligible to say. It's going to check for hello world. The prerequisite should be met, so it passes that check. The length of this is 0, so it should just add it to the list. If you go through, there should be another breadcrumb that it can say. Yep, the third one probably can't say, the fourth one can't say either. We'll pick one at random, and then it will kindly say it to us. Faction X exists, okay. Little bot. Or Faction X. What knowledge has been referred to here? Aha. Faction X has been referred to by the user's message. So say something, and bearing in mind what the user's mentioned. So now we go through. So we're going to check that hello world thing again, right? And it should be eligible to say it. But now reference knowledge is not 0, so we're only going to add stuff in if one of its prerequisites matches what the user's actually talking about right now. So in this case, this one also has no prerequisites, right? Okay. But this one, Faction X Aminis, has the prerequisite of Faction X. So now it is eligible once, and then the last one is not eligible because of prerequisites. Okay. Faction X Aminis. So now let's say how are Faction X Minis? Now the user just referred to two things, right? They've referred to the existence of Faction X, they've referred to the meaniness of Faction X, which should mean that when we go to say something, we're going to pick something we might say. And I feel like a response would have been a nicer word than breadcrumb, but you know, it's a breadcrumb of knowledge. Makes sense to me. So hello world is going to be ignored because it's too vague and non-specific. The other one, also the same. Now we're on to Faction X Armenis, which means you need to know about Faction X to hear that. So it's matched one of those tags, so it gets put in the list once. There we go. Next one here is Faction X Steal Candy from Babies. There are two prerequisites to that, which means that ultimately it gets added once to the eligible list, and then the other tag matches gets added once again. So now if we check our list of eligible responses, we have Faction X Aminis once, and we have Faction X Steal Candy from Babies twice. So yeah, so hopefully the response is now biased towards this more specific stuff. And lo and behold, they kind of respond more specifically. So if I say this again, I'm gonna interesting, what's happened there? Hmm. Lobot. What's happening here? Does the message not contain his ID? Oh, interesting. Oh, okay, I think I know what's happening. Is that lawbot is also a role within the server, which is kind of... Yeah, okay. That's not ideal, really. There I go to server settings while on a stream. Okay, it's probably because I'm an admin, I'm allowed to add people who maybe I shouldn't need to, but... Okay, let's run this again. Say hello. It's just going to give me generic stuff. If I say this, okay, it's kind of responding with some level of intelligence. It still might say faction X amenities, it just has a lesser chance of doing so. Could probably improve this by ranking, kind of scoring these things and then only including things which are like tied for how many tags are matched, if that makes sense. So, you know, this response matches 2 tags, this response matches only 1. So we could count all those up and then only look at the pool of responses which match like 2 tags and then pick randomly from those. But maybe that's overkill. So if I ask about them, they'll tell me about them. If I ask them about things in general, they can respond more generally. But they still might respond with anything, you know, that the prerequisite knowledge has been kind of unlocked for. Okay. How are we doing now? So I think we kind of have the basic system there, right? Like this does what it needs to do. It's more or less a case now of adding content. So, okay, maybe the last step is to save and load this content from a file, because I don't know if I have the mental bandwidth to do the creative writing exercise of actually building all of these. But we should probably at least be able to load or save them from a file. So, okay, I don't know if I've ever written Haskell in my life. Let's go. I'm not a big functional programming person, so I may need your help here. Okay. God damn it. Haskell, really? Okay. You're on board with this as well, right? You gotta help me out. I can... So it does give you some like boilerplate code for like passing the input to these things. If you've never done these before, these are like sort of coding interview type questions. So maybe I can infer from the boilerplate what the Haskell syntax is. But maybe not. I hope it's a trivial challenge because I'm going to have enough of a struggle getting the syntax going. Oh, come on, normally these fill up pretty quick. So I'll leave that in the background. Okay, it's going to start in 30 seconds. We'll just wait while I pull up the Go JSON example. JSON. Okay. Let's go. Okay. You'll be given a positive integer n as input. Print the factorial of n. This is the perfect functional programming question, right? Like that's pretty much what every oh, okay, I thought this was more functional. It looks kind of procedural to me. Okay. Okay, how do I do a for loop? let's see if this does anything. Oh, did not like that. So, okay, what do I need? I need a for loop of some kind. I don't want to just look up factorial because, you know, it's going to happen. Oh dear. Okay. Okay, so I have to do it like recursively, right? So how do I even define a function? Okay, if you let me look up Fibonacci, then I will I will try and derive something from that. Okay. So factorial of, so you do base cases, right? It looks like factorial of 1 equals 1, and factorial of n is equal to n times n minus 1, like that. Is that correct? So, in fact, how do you even call... Oh no, okay. No result. Okay, so how do I cast... Ooh. Ooh. Okay, so can I just do like that? Come on. Look at that. Not gonna lie, I'm kind of proud of myself there. Okay, that kind of makes sense. I looked at this, I thought it was some procedural stuff, but we did it. That was pretty good. Okay, it's supposed to be code golf. Oh. Okay, how can we make this? Okay, we don't need that. Probably don't need this. Do we need that? I don't know. Get rid of the comments. So I can just do show fact n. Fact n should just be f of n. Can I remove these spaces? Okay, I've done something wrong here. Show f of n. Put 2 arguments, but its type is only 1. It was working and I've broken it. What have I done? Undo. Do we get something functional? No pun intended. So should I do like... Okay, does this work? Does indeed. Can you do like ternary in Haskell? Yeah, that's what I thought, but it... didn't like that for some reason. You know, these functional things have weird ways of which the arguments are like packed and unpacked and stuff like that, so... Oh, but yeah, okay. I'm probably getting some handle to like the... the function itself. Okay, so fn is like something which I would then call or evaluate or something. It's probably, that makes it actually get evaluated maybe. Dollar? W Gaffer, hello. Dollar, where do I put my dollar? I've never used Haskell in my life. What does this do? Having no experience of Haskell and basically no experience of functional programming, I feel like I'm getting into a world of hurt. Yeah. Okay. If you want to tell me the code, I'll do it, but otherwise, this is pretty good. Can I just do that? Can I omit return? Can I indent with, where's that tab? Can I indent with a tab instead? Is that shorter? No. I'm quite surprised you just landed in the stream and happened to be a Haskell learner. Okay, is the indent even required? Yes. Okay, I feel like this is as short as I'm going to get. How would I use dollar in this situation then? Like, can I? So this is telling it that it's like going to have a side effect. Is that what I'm imagining? That it's not like pure functional or something. Okay. I probably don't need that either. And let's put Strollen is in there. So would it be like that? Ah. Okay. Does it have to be called main? Presumably, right? I've just got it M. Nope. Is there a ternary in Haskell? Oh, okay. I don't want to do a bit of work and define one. I can remove that comment. Can I let it infer a type? Ooh. Can I use something else instead of indentation? Is that possible? I'm really just guessing here. No. Okay. This is our masterwork. This is complete. Boom. Share the code. Let's see what other people did it in. Okay. Someone's done it in 60 characters. Okay, it's the same thing. I feel like that's minus like boilerplate. I don't know. I'm sure some Haskell master could do this faster, but I'm relatively pleased with that. Cool. So that aside, okay, I'm going to take a quick 2-minute break, and then I'm going to come back and finish off this bot.